guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be talking about the citric acid cycle. Now, if that triggered your sympathetic nervous system and triggered your fight or flight response, I apologize, but it has to be done, right? In my neurotic med pathway, whatever, I probably learned the citric acid cycle 7 times and I forgot it 5 times. Why not 6, you may ask? It's because I came out of the womb not knowing what the citric acid cycle was when I probably should have known what exactly the citric acid cycle is. I probably should have popped out drawing alpha ketoglutarate before the doctor even had the chance to be like, oh my gosh, she's a girl. But anyways, I digress. There are a lot of specific enzymes involved. There are a lot of specific mechanisms involved in this very complex but very central cycle. But at the end of the day, this video is to help you brute memorize the basic facts of it. Alright, so most textbooks or most courses, I guess, are going to tell you to start with oxaloacetate because technically, is it true that oxaloacetate is the one that combines with acetyl-CoA to make our first citrate? Yes, but I'm actually going to have you start with citrate. Reason being, citrate is a very symmetrical molecule. It's way easier to remember what citrate looks like as opposed to what oxaloacetate looks like. So we're going to start with citrate because it's a cycle. It's going to come back to oxaloacetate anyways. So start with citrate always, all right? So we're going to start with citrate. Now, citrate is a 6-carbon molecule, but it has a 5-carbon backbone. So 2, 3, 4, 5. Whenever you have carbons, always a good idea to label them, right? All right, the 6th carbon, now this is why I like citrate. It's super symmetrical. The 6th carbon is going to be sticking out of our exact 3rd molecule, and then we're also going to have an OH group attached to this. Whenever you have COO groups, always just put them at the edge because intuitively it should make sense that these would rather be here than here because it makes it a little bit less stable if it was in the middle of the molecule as opposed to if it's on the periphery of the molecule, right? So always stick your COO groups at the end, and remember citrate is symmetrical, so the 6th carbon has to be in the middle. Okay, the first step that we're going to talk about is the isomerization of citrate. So we're going to make isocitrate. Name should always tell you what the molecule is. So isocitrate is literally just an isomer form of citrate, right? Now, what I want you guys to really get the concept of is that moving carbons around in this cycle is kind of a big deal. Okay, moving carbons around, losing carbon in the form of carbon dioxide, that's a pretty big deal. So chances are, if we do something drastic to the molecule like that, of losing a carbon, you're probably going to remember it. I say all of that to say that if we're just isomerizing a single molecule, which substituent would we rather move around, the carbon or the OH group? Right? Again, moving carbons is a big deal, right? So we're more likely going to move this one around rather than the carbon. So it's the same exact molecule, 3, 4, 5, can't count, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, this is why you always number them. We're gonna leave COO alone because again, moving COOs around, big deal, right? And we're gonna take this and we're gonna pop it on to carbon number 2. And the enzyme that does this is aconitase. All right, the next step, this is the first time that we're gonna lose a carbon, okay? Now, we're gonna lose a carbon. Intuitively, if we were to lose a carbon from this molecule, would we rather lose the carbons that are sitting really prettily in the backbone of the molecule, or would we rather lose the one that's sticking out like a sore thumb? The one that's sticking out like a sore thumb, right? Now, the enzyme that does this is isocitrate dehydrogenase. Always, for enzyme, look to name for function. If we're dehydrogenating this molecule in a sense, right? We're taking a hydrogen away. Where do you see a hydrogen to take away from here? Just point to it. Right here, right? So we're going to take this hydrogen and we're going to pop it onto an electron carrier. Now remember, in the grander scheme of things, the whole point of the citric acid cycle is to generate electron carriers that can carry electrons over to the electron transport chain, right? So if we're going to take a hydrogen away, we're going to pop it right onto an electron carrier. So we're going to pop it on to an NAD+, sorry. So just imagine this hydrogen just going onto here, right? So we have an NAD+. I've said this multiple times in my previous videos as well. Whenever you have a biochemical pathways, I strongly recommend memorizing the enzyme names first because the enzyme names give you exactly what's going to happen to the previous molecule. It gives you an idea of what's going to be produced in the first place. So always pay close attention to enzymes, right? So isocitrate, it's going to take our isocitrate dehydrogenase and it's going to take a hydrogen off, right? And we're also going to lose a CO2 in the process. What is our resultant molecule going to look like? We lost a hydrogen here, so we're going to have a double bond to oxygen now. And then our backbone COO group is still the same. And then this is C2, C3, C4, C5, and C5, and C5 is going to have a COO molecule because it's at the edge, right? And then we lost a carbon in the middle, so this is just going to be CH2, CH2, right? And this one is called alpha keto glutarate. So what did we say earlier? Can I keep selling sex for money, officer? This is keep, alpha keto glutarate, right? All right. So in this next step, we're on a roll. So we want to get rid of another carbon, okay? So what carbon do you think is going to be lost here? Intuitively so, right? Is it going to be the pookie carbon that's just sitting there prettily in the backbone? Or is it going to be the carbon that's sticking out like a sore thumb again? It's going to be the carbon that's sticking out like a sore thumb. So this just has to go, right? So we're going to lose that carbon molecule. Again, we produce another CO2. And that the enzyme that does that is called alpha ketoglutarate dehydrogenase complex. Now, AKG-DH is how I like to abbreviate it, AKG-DH. And remember, anytime we say dehydrogenase of any kind, we're always going to be talking about losing some sort of hydrogen here, right? Unfortunately, it's a little bit less intuitive here on why that happens because we don't see like a hydrogen to kick out anywhere. But just remember that because we have dehydrogenase here, we're still going to be reducing an electron carrier. So it's going to be NAD plus reduced to NADH2. So that NADH2 is going to carry those electrons and it's going to go to the electron transport chain. 2, 3, 4. Always start with your straight backbones. It just makes the molecule easier to remember. So we have COO, and then we just kicked this thing out, right? And we didn't do anything to the oxygen. So we're going to leave the oxygen, and we're actually going to put a S-CoA here. And the reason why that should be easy to remember is because this molecule is called succinyl-CoA. So because this molecule is called succinyl-CoA, we're going to take an S-CoA, and then we're going to replace the CO2 that we just lost with S-CoA. That's how I like to remember this step. So remember succinyl-CoA at this point is, can I keep selling? So succinyl-CoA is somebody who sells. She's serious about business, you know what I mean? So what she actually does is she's actually able to make some money because she's someone who sells, right? And what's money in our metabolic pathways? Always ATP, right? So what succinyl-CoA is able to do in the next step is actually it's able to generate some money, ATP. And the salesman that does this is succinyl-CoA synthetase. So it kind of like follows our story of succinyl-CoA being a good salesman. It's able to make some money, ATP, right? It's also kind of interesting to note that ATP is primarily in muscle cells. And this enzyme is actually able to use GDP in other cells, like fats or liver cells as well. But for the sake of our mnemonic, we're going to remember that succinyl-CoA synthetase is a salesman. It likes to make stuff. It likes to make money. So it's going to make an ATP, right? And then we come to my favorite molecule in the citric acid cycle, and her name is succinate. And you'll see why she's my favorite. Succinate is sexy, okay? In our mnemonic, succinate is going to stand for sex. Can I keep selling sex? Succinate is sexy. Remember, she's sexy. Why is she sexy? Because she's just so symmetrical. She's so just like backbone. We have our 2 COO groups at our end, as we always had, and then we have 2 little CH molecules in the middle, and it's a 4-carbon molecule. She's so sexy. She's so easy to remember, and that's who's succinated. All right, next enzyme is succinate dehydrogenase. What do we do when we have a dehydrogenase? We reduce an electron carrier, so i.e. we add electrons to the electron carriers, right? But succinate dehydrogenase is a little different, okay? Because they're so sexy, they're actually going to use a different electron carrier. So we're actually going to use FAD instead of NAD, and then FAD is going to become FADH2. Right? Same concept, just different molecule because succinate is special in the sense that she is sexy. All right, moving on. I feel really, really, really annoyed calling a molecule sexy over and over again, but so sorry. Like, you gotta internalize that, the fact that succinate is sexy, or else you're not gonna remember this. Anyways, all right, so succinate dehydrogenase, we've dehydrogenased this, and then where we're pulling out our hydrogens in this case is, okay, look at the molecule, tell me where the hydrogens are. it's here and it's here, right? So chances are that if we're going through a dehydrogenase, something's gonna happen to 2 and 3, right? And you'd be right. So it's actually gonna create a double bond between the two carbon molecules that just lost their hydrogens because it was a dehydrogenase that did something to this sexy molecule, right? So we're gonna still have our very, very symmetrical molecule. Because we have a double bond in the middle, we're gonna have a molecule that looks like this. And then this thing is called fumarate. Can you tell that I have less affinity to fumarate than succinate? Me being like succinate is so sexy, and then I'm calling fumarate like this thing. But anyways, fumarate is also pretty easy to remember just because you know that these hydrogens from succinate has been dehydrogenased to FADH. And then if there's going to be a double bond here, obviously there's going to be an H's here on the other side, right? So just knowing what happens low key helps you remember what fumarate is going to look like because you know that these hydrogens have to go, right? So you're going to have a double bond, and then you're going to have these substituents on either side. All right, we're almost at the end. Okay, can I keep selling sex for money? Let's talk about money. So money is malate. So malate is going to be a 4-carbon backbone because, again, we didn't lose a carbon anymore, right? So we're still going to have 4 carbons. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And then what malate is going to look like is always the end carbon is going to be COO groups. So again, start with your COO groups. And then like we attached an OH to the citrate molecule, we're going to attach an OH to the malate molecule. And this reason being is that the enzyme that catalyzes this step is called fumarase. And fumarase is fuming. Like think of like a angry man with steam coming out of his ears and it's fuming. Fumarase. What does it need? Water. Right? Water coming into fumarase, and then that's going to attach onto carbon number 2 of malate. Good? All right. Finally, we have malate dehydrogenase. Again, we have a dehydrogenase as our enzyme. What does that mean? We're going to take some kind of hydrogen from somewhere. Intuitively, like we did at the citrate molecule or the isocitrate molecule where we took the H from the OH, we're also going to take our hydrogen this time from the OH as well. Meaning that we're going to end up with something that looks a lot like malate, except we're going to have a double bond to oxygen, right? Because we just lost that. We just lost this to an electron carrier, in which this case, malate dehydrogenase isn't special, so she's just going to use NAD plus and NADH2, right? So we're going to have a double bond of oxygen to this carbon, and everything else stays the exact same. And this is actually our Pookie Perfect oxaloacetate. And this is the molecule that every other textbook is going to make you start with. Like that's going to be step 1. And technically in the citric acid cycle is a step 1, yes, because this is going to combine with acetyl-CoA to again make citrate, right? And the molecule that does this is citrate synthetase, which should be really intuitive to realize because it's the enzyme that makes citrate, right?